this adoption story was not quite as straightforward as the first time we adopted. So let's jump in. Hey there, if you are new here, this is the first time you clicked on one of my videos, welcome. My name is Katie, and I'm an adoptive mom to 3 kids who are currently ages 7, 10, and 14, which still blows my mind. And I work as an adoption consultant to help families from all across the country who are hoping to adopt waiting children from foster care. So today I wanted to share the story of our second adoption because, as wild as it is, it's not a story I've really told in full on here. Just to give a quick little bit of background information, we adopted our youngest daughter first. Her name is Brielle, and she came to us in March of 2019, and she was a waiting child in foster care. Now, she wasn't waiting very long because she was only 1.5 when we were matched with her, and she moved in. We had a 6-month, a little close to 7-month period of her being in our home, and then we were able to adopt her in October of 2019. And adoption was something I had wanted to do for a long time. It was something my husband had even thought about when he was in high school, that it was something he would want to do someday. And for us, adoption was plan A. It really felt like that is what God was calling us to do in terms of our parenthood journey. Neither of us really felt this huge need or desire to have biological children. We both just felt like there are a lot of kids out there already who were looking for a family and needed that. And if we were to have our own children, we wouldn't be able to necessarily take on as many children through adoption. So we were so overjoyed when we were matched with our youngest daughter, and we were actually very shocked we were matched with a child that young. I want to just put it out here. That is not that common to adopt a child that young. A lot of people in our agency were super surprised. We were super surprised because we had made our age range from 0 to 10, and we were open to up to 4 kids, I think, which would have been insane. I have 3 kids now, and I'm like, yeah, three's good. I'm good with 3. I'm still not used to this filming location right now. I'm like, is the lighting good? Is it gonna look bad? I just thought it'd be appropriate to sit on a really cozy chair for story time with Katie as I tell you our adoption story. But if you want to know more about our first adoption story, I have a video. It is one of the very first videos from this channel, but I will link it above in case you're interested in hearing that one. But we're talking about the adoption of my older 2 kids. So it's kind of funny because, we finalized the adoption of my youngest in October of 2019. And we knew we wanted to adopt again, but we weren't really sure about the timing. We didn't want to rush too much into it, but we also didn't want to get to a point where our license was expiring and we needed to do all these classes again. So we thought, hey, let's tell our agency that we're interested in getting started on the next process. And the truth is, we thought that it was going to take a long time to get a match. It took us about 6 months the first time, maybe a little bit more than that, to be matched with our daughter. And we just felt like we had a lot of luck in that situation and that it was unlikely it was going to be that quick again. And we knew we were going to have to be a little bit pickier about what children or child we said yes to because we already had a daughter in our home and we needed to make sure it was going to be a safe situation for everyone involved. So we told our agency, I think it was early January of 2020, that we were interested in getting started on adopting again. And we were like, oh, it'll probably be quite a while until we hear anything. Well, it ended up being either late February or very early March. I want to say it was late February. They were like, hey, we found these kids that we think could be a really good fit for you. Here's this information about them. There's a 5-year-old boy and a 9-year-old girl. They're brother and sister. They've been in the same foster home for 3 years. They seem to be very well adjusted and doing well within that foster home. But the catch is that it's a legal risk placement. So needless to say, we were shocked that we found a potential match that quickly. The legal risk side I'll get into in a minute, but we were just very stressed out that it was happening so fast because we thought we were going to have all this time to kind of go through the matching process, have some space between finalizing the adoption of our youngest and then moving on to adopting other children as well. Anyway, we learned some things about these kids, and one of the things was that they currently lived with a foster grandma, as they called her. She was about 82 years old at the time, and they had been with her for 3 years. So they had been with her for a very long time. That's actually pretty rare in foster care that you don't have these kids move over and over and over again. They only had one previous placement before her for about 6 months, It wasn't a great situation there. It was actually really terrible. And so they moved the kids to the other home, and they had been just doing really well there since. And so that was really promising to us, that they had that kind of stability, and they seemed like they were doing well. They were used to being around other kids, and they seemed to do well with that. And so we thought, hey, let's pursue this. Let's look into it. They were within our state. They were about 3 hours away, but still within state lines. So we didn't have to go through the interstate adoption process, which isn't necessarily a horrible thing to go through. It's just a lot slower. So, and I mentioned earlier that they were going to be a legal risk placement. I have a whole video about legal risk placements. If you want to look up more, I can link that above and below as well. However, legal risk placement simply means that they were not currently legally free to adopt. So it wasn't going to follow the same timeline that most adoptions would, where the child would move in with you and you'd wait 6 months and then you'd be able to adopt. It was kind of an unknown how long they would be in our home before we could adopt them. But they were very confident that adoption was coming. So their parental rights had actually already been terminated, but then their mom made an appeal on the case to see if they could undo the termination of the parental rights. And it had honestly just been sitting in the court waiting to be reviewed by the judge. From what everyone told us, our agency, we asked them, how many times have you had a legal risk placement that hasn't ended in adoption? And they said that had never happened. They'd always had all of their legal risk placements end in adoption. And so that gave us some confidence to move forward. And it was very much that the caseworkers for the children as well were like, listen, this is definitely going to happen. They can't even consider any new information when they do the appeal process. They can't say, oh, now the parents have done this and this and this. They can only review the information they already had. And so we decided to go meet the kids. And the craziest thing is, we met these kids like a day or two before the entire world shut down with COVID. So it was the middle of March that we met them. And then right after that, all the schools closed. I mean, it was immediately after that. All the schools closed, everything was shut down. And so we were in this really weird situation. But first, I want to share how that first visit went, because there were so many good things about it. And then there were also some really crazy things about it. So the first night that we met the children was actually in their foster home, which this is what we did with our youngest as well. I highly recommend it. It's so nice to just meet them on their turf where they're living. You get to see kind of like what their current living situation is there. You get to see some of their routines and some of the toys they have. And I just feel like it gives you a good peek into the life that they're currently living. And that visit went so well. We absolutely loved their foster grandma. The kids seemed really open to talking with us, and they played with our daughter Brielle, and it was just so cute. One of the kids actually called me mom on the very first night, which at the time I was like, oh my gosh, like I wanted to cry, because I just wasn't anticipating that. Now looking back, I'm kind of like, maybe that wasn't great that the boundaries weren't there, that they were ready to call me mom so fast, but I think there was just such a desire to have that normalcy in their life, and it was just really sweet. And it's honestly a really sweet memory for me hearing them say that the first night. And it kind of, I think that probably helped, because they called their foster mom grandma. And so it was a little bit of a different situation. But they were super sweet. We got to talk with them and play with them. And honestly, it just went so well. I actually have a picture from that night that I took, so I'll include a picture there because it was just so sweet. And so we stayed the night nearby so that the next morning we could go visit them again, since it was a pretty long trip. And while we were there, it made sense. So our plan was to just like go to Chick-fil-A for lunch with them and have them play on the play set. So we were like, yeah, we'll just do that. But Chick-fil-A must have been onto the fact that COVID was coming, and they had shut down their play area, probably to avoid all the germs that were going around. So of course the kids were like disappointed, because they're like, you said we were gonna play on the play set here and we can't do it. And we're like, oh no. So the social worker who had come with us suggested we go to Skate World. I don't know how far-reaching Skate World is. Like, I'm pretty sure it's a chain, but you can imagine it's a skating rink, but it also has like play areas for kids, big like bouncy house things. It's all indoors. There's an arcade. There's just a lot going on. And it sounded like a fun idea in some ways. But let me tell you, it was kind of awful. Not because the kids were awful, it was just such an overstimulating environment for them and for us. And it was just like, it was just a little chaotic to be thrown into that situation, especially when we weren't expecting it and the kids weren't expecting it. So we couldn't go through and kind of prepare them for what was going to happen. Now, I will say the kids had been there before, so that was helpful. But the bad part about that is with us never having been there, they're like trying to run off and go do things. And our son at the time had just not gotten out much. You know, his 82-year-old grandma was amazing, loved him. But, you know, she just is limited to what she can do in taking them out places. And so it was like, he had no boundaries of kind of like, I need to stay near these adults. And so he was just like running off. And there's tons of people here and we're like, we cannot lose this kid on the first time we're like hanging out with them. So that was a little stressful. Also, the older two kids said, oh yeah, we can skate. We've done it before. And I was like, oh, okay. So we went through this whole ordeal of getting them skates. They didn't have the right size. We had to get other ones. And then they try to go out and skate and they can't skate. And I find out they actually haven't done it before. They've just been there before. And so it was all this time kind of, and then they were let down because they couldn't skate. We already couldn't go to the play place at Chick-fil-A. It was a little crazy. And then we had situations while we were there as well where our daughter, oldest daughter, she wasn't our daughter at the time, but she wanted to go to the arcade and she wanted to spend money there. So we got her like a little card to spend money, but you know, she definitely wanted more money. And so my husband was with her trying to like help her choose which games to do that would fit within the budget she had. And then I was running after the younger two who were having fun together. But again, they were just kind of like running off and then I couldn't see them. And it was a little bit stressful, but we made it through. It was okay. And I will say overall, the social workers who were there and kind of like observing and helping a little bit, they were like, we think it's going really well. It seems like they're listening to you. And one of them even said like, oh, one of them was testing you and you passed the test because they were testing how you were going to respond to something. I'm sorry. I'm going to be like putting my hair behind my ear and then taking it out 50,000 times in this video because I'm always like, does my hair look weird? If that annoys you, that I keep doing that, I am very sorry. So after that visit, everything shut down for COVID, and that included our visits with the children, which was terrible because normally you'll have a first visit and then you'll have a few more, and then eventually the kids will move in. So it was really hard to kind of be like, hey, we met you, and now you're not going to be able to see us for quite a while. So that was a little concerning. I also am pretty sure that Nick and I had COVID from going to Skate World. I don't know for sure because they were kind of telling people at that point not to go out and get tested unless they had like really severe symptoms. But we had never been so sick ever in our lives. And it was right after that. And I was like, I bet you we had COVID. Because I think after we left, we found out there were a few cases in that town, in that city. And it's kind of a touristy area. And so we were like, oh my goodness, I bet we have COVID. But we made it through. So we couldn't have any visits with them. My dog is in here and decided to start barking at a dog walking by. Probably because she's jealous. So yeah, we couldn't do any more visits with them for the foreseeable future. I mean, you remember how unknown everything was at that time. And we were just like, oh my goodness, this is so different than our last adoption because we're not going to be able to visit like each weekend for several weeks or whatever the plan would be. And there was also tricky because their foster grandma was not really like up with the technology. I probably will not be up with the technology at that age either, let's be real. But she didn't even have internet at her house. So we couldn't do FaceTime or anything like that. So the only way we could really keep in touch with them was over the phone or sending something through the mail. So we decided to set up calls a few times a week, which really we were only talking to our daughter because our son was a 5-year-old boy and he was not interested in being on the phone. He still is not that interested in being on the phone almost ever. So we had a lot of conversations with our daughter though, which was actually great. One thing we did is we printed off a list of fun questions for parents and kids to ask each other, and we mailed it to her so that she could have a copy. And then when we would call, we would take turns going through those questions. And it just made it a little bit less awkward because it wasn't like trying to find things to talk about. Because you have to realize we had only met her basically 2 times. And that's if you're, that's 2 times in one weekend. So we didn't know that much about her. She didn't know that much about us. So I think that was a good move on our parts to have those questions. And she really loved doing that. We also sent them like little gifts, like really small things, like just like a little bracelet or a little craft thing that they could do. And they sent us, I think, like maybe some coloring pages or things. It was nice. It was a nice way to keep in touch when we couldn't do anything else. And then in early June, we were supposed to have a visit. And my husband and I actually made like a trip out of it. We went up to Michigan and we stayed with his aunt and his family. And we just like, we're like, hey, we'll spend a couple days here and then we'll go pick them up. And we were supposed to take them to our house this time. And like a day or two before we were supposed to go get them, they called us and they said they had to cancel it because one of the girls that was living in their home, one of the foster girls, tested positive for COVID. And so they had to quarantine. And oh my goodness, we were so sad. And it was especially sad because I know our daughter was really, really sad that she didn't get to come. And so we had to kind of reschedule for later in June. Thankfully, we were eventually able to see them again, and that is when we had the first weekend visit at our house, which that was super interesting too, because so much happened. First of all, we found out very quickly in this car ride that they had never been on a car ride like outside of their area, especially my son. My daughter said she may have had a couple, but she couldn't remember super clearly. Like maybe she went to Michigan, but that wasn't that far. And it was a little over 3-hour trip from their house to ours. And I mean, like every 10 minutes, my son would be like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? I was like, no, we made sure that like we had things in the car for them to do and keep them busy. But oh my goodness. And then of course they wanted to like stop places and get snacks and all these fun things. And so it was a really interesting drive. We got back and I've told this story before on like a story time video I did, but that weekend that they were there was absolutely insane. First night, one of our kids threw up all over like the table and floor because they were stuffing themselves so full of food. We got food from a restaurant and they just really liked it. And this is a common thing with kids who are adopted. If they've ever had food insecurity, even at a really young age, it can be kind of triggering if you're in a new place. And so this child ate like so much that they made themselves sick. And then on one of the other days, we were walking to the park and a dog ran out at our dog that we were walking. It wasn't on a leash and it attacked our dog, and our kids were the kids were right there. I had to like shield them. Oh my goodness. Thankfully our dog was fine. She's so fluffy that she survived. So you can see her right here. She's very fluffy. This was one situation where us not being responsible enough to get her haircut early paid off because it protected her from that bite. But obviously our kids were terrified by that, and they had a situation earlier in their lives where one of their other siblings who was placed with a family member had been bitten by the exact same type of dog that bit our dog. And so it was really kind of re-traumatizing them. Oh my goodness, it was insane. And there's nothing we could have done about it. We were just walking to the park and this person's dog was out and he's like, oh, don't worry, they're nice. And then the dog came and attacked us. I'm like, put your dog on a leash. Like, don't do this. But overall, we had a good weekend. We did make some good memories. We went on a little hike together. We just did some little fun things together that the kids enjoyed and we enjoyed. And we did notice like some struggles, especially with our son. I think he's just at that age where it was confusing for him to understand what was going on. And I think he was feeling anxious and then kind of came out in some anger. And we were like asking his foster grandma, is he normally like this? And she was like, oh no, he's normally not like that at all. So it was kind of interesting. Then they came for some longer visits. I think we went like mini golfing one time. We went and did all sorts of stuff. We did some fun activities. There were definitely some big meltdowns that would happen here and there during these visits. But we made some really good memories, especially we got to celebrate Maya's 10th birthday, her very first birthday with us. And then in July of 2020, they officially moved in, and having them leave their foster grandma's house was so bittersweet because we were so excited to have them with us full time. But their foster grandma was like really trying to keep it together. And then after they walked outside, she just cried and we hugged. She is just such a sweet woman. We're still in contact. We still go visit her. She was just such an encouragement to me. At that time, she'd say, we prayed for a family just like yours, and God answered our prayers, and you're here now. And it was just, I would call her when I was struggling and be like, how should I handle this situation? What did you do when they did this? And just love her. So it's really hard to watch her struggling so much and being so sad to say goodbye, even though she was so happy for them at the same time. And not long after they moved in with us, we actually had to take them to Tennessee because my brother was getting married. So they got to go to their first wedding, like first big wedding. I think for my son, it was his first wedding ever. And they got to go to Tennessee for the first time, and we stayed with my parents, and we stayed with my parents at a little Airbnb. So they got to spend some time with the kids. And yeah, it was just really cool to have that trip with them, even though there were some ups and downs, obviously. And then life just went on. We had those early days, there were so many firsts. We got to do first time swimming for one of our kids, first time trick-or-treating, first time traveling, all sorts of first time sledding, all sorts of things that they had never gotten to experience before. And I didn't even realize that. And then I realized we got to experience those with them. And so that was really cool. There were also struggles, there were. One of our kids in particular had a honeymoon phase where they were the most perfectly behaved child ever in the first few weeks. And then there was a steep drop off, which we did expect, but it is hard. Our other child struggled more at the beginning and then was better after about a month or two. They were pretty well adjusted. And felt pretty comfortable with us. I always say it's nice when our kids decide to have their mental breakdowns at different times, so we just are dealing with one at a time. So I'm not going to complain too much about that. And then in March of 2021, so we're talking a year after we met them for the very first time, we were told that we were allowed to adopt them, and we were so excited. And we were trying to think of the perfect way to tell them, and we just hadn't come up with a good way yet. And we were kind of like, oh, we'll do it on Friday. Because it was like, I don't know, a Wednesday when we found out. Like, let's do it on the weekend. And I'm so glad we didn't tell them, because they called us back 2 days later. Like, we were going to tell them that night. And they said, actually, you can't adopt them. And we were like, what? They said that there was another appeal made. And they didn't even know that it was possible that another appeal could be made. And so it was, again, going to be like unknown when we were going to adopt them. So we were just, honestly, we were just relieved we didn't tell the kids and get their hopes up, because that would have been really devastating for them to tell them that and then say, never mind. I really think God was protecting our kids in that moment by having us wait to tell them, because they had no clue. I don't even know to this day if they were aware that that happened. So we began some of the process. They had us kind of start the process so that when the appeal was dropped, we'd be ready to adopt more quickly, because they felt really bad that they had told us we'd be able to adopt them and they had to take it away. So they have the kids do like a goodbye visit with their biological parents. And for us, it wasn't goodbye, because we knew we were going to maintain contact with their mom. And so, but they did it anyway. And she got them a couple gifts. And so we did that. And then many months later, in January of 2022, we were finally able to officially adopt them into our family. And it was so, so exciting. I think we found out maybe in December, and then we were just waiting on the court date for January. And so I think I have a video of the night that we told them, or the day we told them about it. So if I do, I'm going to include that here. Mommy, so everybody has their own ice cream, but there's a special reason why.
Yes.
Any guesses?
Because we're leaving.
Because you're leaving on a trip?
That's a pretty good guess.
That's a pretty good guess. Any other guesses? Okay, so I want you guys to all go look at the turkey and see if you can figure out why we're having ice cream, why we're celebrating something. Go look at what's on the turkey.
Because it's Christmas.
That's a good guess. Okay, what do you see one that's added? Okay, what does that one say? Can you read it, Maya?
We are thankful that we get to adopt Maya. Maya and
Yep, we get
in
to adopt you
January.
in January.
So after Christmas, like probably about a month after Christmas, you're gonna be officially adopted.
You guys get to have Clark and everything.
Maya passed out. So it will be official. Did you hear that, Bria? We're gonna adopt them. They get to be adopted and have a special adoption day.
And we don't
Yeah.
have to
You
always
were-
go to.
Yeah, you'll be there too.
You'll be there too.
You're already adopted. You already had your special day now, right there.
My back. And then my foot though.
All right, so that's what we're celebrating.
That's what we're celebrating. That's good.
And now it has been almost exactly 5 years from the time that we first heard about our older two kids. We first were told that they had a potential match for us, and that's just wild to me that it has been that long. It does not feel that way. You know, they always say with parenting, the days are long, but the years are short. And my husband and I were just talking about this the other day. Like, that is so, so true. Some days feel super long and you're like, am I going to make it through? And then you look back and I'm like, how has it already been 5 years? Like, it does not feel like that at all. But I am so encouraged at the growth we've seen in our kids. I'm just so excited to continue to watch them grow and see the adults that they turn into someday. And I think some of the fears that I may have had for them and their futures at the beginning when they first moved in, a lot of those have dissipated. And I am so hopeful about their futures and where they're headed. And it's just a huge blessing. And I'm just so thankful that God brought them into our lives and that everything kind of worked out in that way. And I thought it might be fun to end this video with our adoption day video. It was a cute little few-minute video that my sister-in-law put together for us. So here it is if you want to watch that. Thank you so much for watching this entire video. If you made it to the end, you are one of my people. And I like to do a thing where if you made it all the way to the end, I have a secret question for you to answer in the comments. So a secret question this time is, what brought you to this video? Are you someone who has already adopted or fostered? Are you someone who is interested in it? Or are you just here because you saw a video and you were like, that looks interesting? But either way, I'd love to know what brought you to this video. And let's add a secret emoji to it just to confuse people. Let's put a star emoji with whatever you write so that I know that you're my people who make it all the way to the end of the video. This was a long one, but I think it's fun to share the story. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to my channel for more adoption content if you are someone who is either you've already adopted or you're hoping to adopt or foster. I'd love to have you here with us, and I will see you next time. Have an amazing week.